Hello and welcome to the Cultural Care Series, podcast edition, from the Culture Co-op, Lancaster District's Cultural Education Partnership. For the first in a series of roundtable discussions, we invited a few local professionals to discuss how, by understanding and accepting intersectionality, we can challenge deep-seated inequalities with concrete actions, so that the next generation of arts makers are not burdened by our past mistakes.
So hello everybody, welcome to the Black Square podcast. I think it would be really lovely if we started off with some introductions. So I will introduce myself and then I'll pick someone and then we'll just pick the next person and go around the room. So my name's Charlotte, I'll also answer to SHAR, and I am a musician. Among other things, and yeah, I'm just super happy to be here and hosting this podcast, so I'll hand it over to Geraldine.
Hi, my name is Geraldine Onek. I'm a primary school teacher by profession, but my most recent achievement, I'd like to say, is I'm the chair of Lancaster Black History Group, who were formed as a result of the BLM movement in Lancaster last year. So I've been working with schools to try and bring Black history into the classroom.
Amazing. Catherine?
Hello there, I'm Catherine Mugonyi and I'm based in Blackpool. I am a director of a voluntary arts organisation called Auty Social, and we do lots of participatory, fun, often very silly kind of arts projects that are very much grassroots and community led. I'm also a trustee of Creative Lives, which is formerly Voluntary Arts, the UK charity supporting amateur artists, and also sit on the committee for the National Lottery Heritage Fund, supporting heritage projects across the north.
Great. And Blue?
Yeah, so I'm Blue Saint. My name's Daniel Sibiyange. Everyone calls me Blue because my name's Blue Saint. So just call me Blue throughout this whole project, throughout this whole roundtable, virtual roundtable. And I'm a spoken word artist, music artist, actor and designer. And I'm based in Liverpool. And yeah, that sums me up.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I think, let's start off with the first question. And this just goes out to all of you and just, dip in. But what would you say that's changed, for yourselves and maybe within the organisations that you work in since the BLM movement last year? So that is to anybody.
So for me personally, I'll be honest, like Black Lives Matter was not a phrase I used about over a year ago. And I think the pandemic and witnessing something so volatile and like in your face, like the George Floyd's murder, something needed to change. So for me, I went to the protest in my home city. And if people don't know what Lancaster is predominantly white. I was a bit apprehensive about attending because I didn't know, first of all, if there was going to be a turnout and if it was going to be welcoming and not hostile, because at the end of the day, it was a protest during the pandemic. But what actually happened was the best thing, like a range of people came from, young students up to the older generation showing support. My sister spoke on the steps and it kind of spiraled for us for there. We wanted to do something which was a movement, and that's what we've always said. Like, so many people last year, like, did that Black Square, and that was it. That was their little contribution. I was adamant that it wasn't going to be tokenistic, and so Lancaster Black History Group was formed. And there's 11 members, and I've made sure it's a grassroots community. So we involve teachers like myself, lecturers, community people, who do voluntary work, and we involve the community in all the projects. We've worked with schools, and we're getting the community to live up to like our history, especially Lancaster was the 4th largest slave port, and there's nowhere showing that in our history books. And so we've been working with the schools to try and bring that into the classroom, supporting them with resources. And I think it took the Black Lives Matter movement to make that happen, because all of a sudden schools are wanting to listen and do better and make sure it's not just Black History Month and then put the things away. They're looking at the curriculum in all topics and seeing how can we represent Black history throughout in the arts, you know, better representation, and not just using the same old historical figures that they do day in, day out. And it's a big ask, you know, like at the end of the day, we're asking them to change and do something different. But the journey's on the right path, I feel, for me. So yeah.
That's cool. Mine's somewhat similar as well. As in, I mean, it's always something that I've always talked about, and like many people around me have always talked about, like the inequalities around Black lives, and also like I remember doing the piece. It was actually crazy because I remember doing the spoken word piece that basically was talking about like the Black lives, because about what something similar. The kid years prior to George Floyd that I read a piece about that was very similar to George Floyd, to the George Floyd death. So it was almost like, here's another repetition of what we've always basically talked about for many years. So it was something that we talked about. But I will say that when the 2020 the unfortunately the good thing that came out of that bad situation was that I saw that, especially with the fact that we were in COVID and everything was stopped, so nobody could be distracted from what was occurring. It was all over the news, and you couldn't escape it. It made people outside of just Black people and other ethnicities really pay attention to what was going on, and really come to like be involved and like be like become like allies with the movement. That's what I started to see. And yeah, so a lot of big changes have occurred for me, at least. And like many things have sparked that like are directly connected to it. So I'm part of this group at Anti-Great. I don't even know if I can properly publicize it yet, because it's still in the form and it's still being formulated before it gets publicized. But for the past year, I've been almost year, I've been in this anti-racism group with a big organization. It's a bridge organization, so it works with many big arts and educational organizations throughout England, so it's national, and that we've been going through like ways in which we can tackle both subtle and in-your-face types of racism, from a top-down perspective, not just as well as bottom-up, but yeah, like from positions of power, you know, so we can end up creating changes on a larger scale. So like that's one of the things, and then many other things such as this, like many people wanting discussions and talks. I've been involved in quite a lot of those, and like being featured in a few like magazines in which they talk with other Black artists and Black people within the community to see what sort of problems and issues are occurring and how we can make those changes. Yeah, so I'll end it there, otherwise I keep talking. Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
I've got a slightly different sort of take on this. So I think since last year, the biggest changes have been very personal. I realised how tired I was. So before concentrating on my work with Auntie and as a director, I've worked in local government for a long time. So most previously at the Harris as a creative programmer in Preston. And before that, I was with Blackpool Council as their equality advisor for 10 years. So giving advice on access, inclusion, hate crime reporting to all of those different departments. And I think because of that kind of role, you have to go out and make connections and you have to talk to a lot of people, and you're an advisor, that's your job. But despite it no longer being my job, the amount of requests for help, education, quite frankly, just work, it was a little heavy-handed. So I saw lots of organisations wanting to respond, wanting to hopefully do better and go beyond a black square, but they wanted me to do the work and they wanted me to do it for nothing. And that is really problematic in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this last year has been about me taking a step back and looking at the environment and looking at going beyond representation and looking at, well, what does true equity look like as individuals, in a wider civil society, as organisations and institutions? How do these structures work, and how have they kept on perpetuating what we have to deal with all the time? So it's been very kind of introspective, thinking about what's my role in this, but it's also been quite exploratory, sort of looking at how things function. And yeah, it's been difficult, really difficult, because when you're part of a bigger organisation, you want it to be good. You know, we all want to do things that help people, that create the right environment for great culture. But sometimes you think, actually, have I been contributing to a system that is completely the opposite? And so there's been, for me, it's been a lot of thought and a lot of taking time for myself, and also remembering to just rest, because the demands are constant. And sometimes they're framed, you know, and it's in a way that, yes, you want to help. Of course you want to help, but you've got to think about taking care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, how are we going to help all these other people? And you just can't do that. So I've been thinking about taking a step back, resting properly, being kind to myself, which I'm not very good at. I hold my hands up, but also thinking about how can I take up some more space, you know, because I'm in a very privileged position in that I'm now working freelance and I don't necessarily have to feel like I'm a representative all the time. So I'm in a good position to question stuff. So it's about authentically taking up that space and just sort of trying to change the narrative and trying to change the center of conversations, of discussions, and just, yeah, it really has been a year of sort of discovery, really.
Well, thank you for that. That was really eye-opening, and I think it's such a good point, Catherine, about looking after yourself. And, you know, what happened with, you know, George Floyd was so traumatic, and, you know, I think it, you know, like you said, Blue, it brought up stuff that you've been speaking about for years, you know, and you've been making work on and stuff like that. And, you know, I think that's a really good point to just highlight about the fact that, you know, it's been a time to really look after yourself as well, and change your perspective. Go, Catherine.
Yeah, just to add something, and I think giving a bit of context to this podcast recording is thinking about what day it is and what's happening in light of the Euros final last night. So yeah, I'm not a football fan and I kind of stayed away from it, but I'm part of a committee of the sort of Blackpool Wire and Filed African Caribbean Association, and I kept seeing little things come up saying, I'm really worried about my kids going into school today. I'm worried about what reaction there's going to be in light of what's happened and what's appearing on social media. So I don't know about for everyone else, but I had to take a real sort of deep breath and a sort of ground myself before coming onto this, because it's full on, and it's just, yeah, it's, I thought today might be really, really challenging, and how do I be a bit kinder to myself and sort of prep for this recording?
Everyday racism though, isn't it? I felt Catherine hit a nail there. Like, it was all of a sudden you became the voice. People would come to you for everything, to interviews. I was getting asked to speak on panels on topics because they wanted that opposing view. And, you know, I was like, I'm not the only voice. And again, unpaid work as well, and like they don't realize it was time. And a lot of the year I spent, you know, trying to increase the profile of Lancaster Black History as a group. So I would attend these meetings and Zoom platforms just so we could get our voice out there. But equally, it was exhausting. I remember having to take a social media break because day in, day out, it was another death. It was another Black child disappearing. It was another, something daily was happening. And as a platform, having a social media platform, people were turning to you to report on it or have some kind of, you know, acknowledge it in some way, whether a post or at least comment on it. Whether I had to literally say, I'm having a social media break just for my own mental health.
No, I completely relate to that because I remember also specifically telling certain people at some point in time, like, I need a break. Like, I need to take a chill, I need to relax. Just does really get tiring. And yeah, like the beautiful thing is, I remember seeing somebody had sent me a post where like it was like a list of documentation that people who want to learn about what's going on can look at. So sometimes I just send that through, like, start there.
Google is free. That's what I was telling you. Google is free. Like, we live in a world where at the click of a hand, you can get all that information. You don't even have to go out and buy these books. Like, we're not an encyclopedia, and Black trauma shouldn't be, you know, sensationalized. Like, it shouldn't be used and as clickbait. And I just feel sometimes people forget it's our experiences that we're sharing, and you know, it's not enjoyable. Yeah,
because sometimes then you're having to like relive traumatic events and so on and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. And that was talking about doing things that are unpaid. I remember the beautiful thing with like is like in the organization that I'm a part of, like I'm also getting paid for the discussions in which we're having, because I'm and other things or a few other places also, because I remember that was something that in some discussions that I was in that we brought up. We were like, we constantly talk about these things. We should be getting paid for this too, you know, like it shouldn't be free.
Throw me the money.
Yeah, like we could talk about it, just like you get consultants, you pay with the consultants. The same should be applied with this. Yeah.
Amazing. Let's move on to our question 2. So thinking about how both organizations and individuals, we've kind of mentioned about the performative black square thing, and you know, and how do individuals and organizations move past performative actions such as hashtags and the black square, you know, to enact you know, racial equality and social change, essentially. And again, that goes out to all of you.
I think from a teacher's perspective, I've always wanted to ensure that it's embedded, and in order to do that, it's looking at current policies, like what are they doing already? You know, each school has to have a school improvement plan. We've already identified that Black students don't do as well, especially boys. So what are they doing to improve that, including resources that they're using in schools? Like, are the books diversified? You know, are you showing representation across all kind of like ethnicity, gender? Small things like this make a big impact. You know, we can do this straight away. It's not things that are having to cost thousands of pounds, and it's also ensuring that they understand the purpose of why they're doing it. Because I think here in Lancaster, some people genuinely believe, oh well, we don't have children of colour in our school, therefore we don't need to. And I'm like, those are the children who do need to, because they'll have this warped vision of what people of colour are. If they don't have representation in books, or you're not referencing to them in, you know, science lessons and using science inventors who were Black. Therefore, they're going to have these stereotypical versions of what people of color do, you know, just footballers, just singers, just, you know, categorizing them. And I'm trying to make sure things like events like Black to the Future, where we invite people of color in professions which are not common for those people. So we invite professors, we invite scientists, so children can see the scope and understand that, yes, a Black person can be an astronaut, an Asian person can be a ballet dancer. And I think that's for me, and I'm making ensuring that schools commit to the long term and not just, you know, buy in, like I said, Black History Month, get the resources out. The October's 31st comes around, put them away. What are you doing for the rest of the year, kind of thing?
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I'd probably just add to that, yeah, because that's where all the big changes are made. It's in policy, you know. Yeah, so I'd say that to actually create, like, I basically be saying some similar things to what Geraldine's already said, because it applies to not just say you applied it from a teaching perspective, but applies to like just everything in general, you know, wherever organization it is. That's where all the big changes are made. Like, and also looking at, like, in terms of like quick things you can do that aren't expensive. Look at the way in which you market your things, the way in which marketing and communications type sort of things, like sending out like job offers and things like that, making sure that the language is doesn't sound as if it excludes others and is open to other people. Sometimes like specific jargon and things like that can prevent people of color from feeling as if that a specific opportunity is also aimed towards them, you know, like things, very small things like that. Things such as like changing, making sure that, but going back to representation as well, just making sure that wherever you end up marketing, whether it's on the website or on social media or whatever, like the people there are also, you can see like the diversity there also, because what you see is going to also drive whether or not you believe you're also like belonging to that space also, you know, like those are just like really quick things like that. But I do believe that the biggest thing is definitely policy. Like policy makes the biggest changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm mulling things over, as you can see by my face.
I understand. I'm the same.
There is so much at play here, and I think the important thing is thinking about that concrete change, the stuff that will make a difference to people here and now. Yes, we've, especially in the arts and other sectors, we've been talking about diversity strategies and equality policies and all these plans for years on end, but how much progress have we really made? You know, how much tangible progress have we made? And it really gets me thinking about, you know, we've got all these good intentions, but where are they leading? So in terms of thinking about concrete things, it's very sort of specific to where you work and who you work with. It's something that has to be suitable. There's no sort of blanket, if you do this, then you will be better, apart from treating people well. You know, that's ground zero here. You know, the bar is really low, come on. So, so, you know, realising things like your workforce diversity, where your issues are, doing the monitoring, that's basic level, okay? So no one should expect loads of cookies for that. But building up on that, I think there needs to be conversations, and there needs to be a real effort to reach out to those people who aren't represented within your organisational structure, whether that is as part of the workforce, whether that is somebody who sort of benefits from an activity or participates in it. And I don't think any one person can tell you exactly how to do that, because where you work is, you know a lot about it. You're in a unique situation. But like Geraldine said, Google is free. There are groups, there are people, there are organizations, all with tips and help that might be able to assist you in your locality. So it's, at first, doing a little bit of research goes a long, long way. A lot of this starts with workforce, and we've already touched on it before. Thinking about who is there, who is in the room making the plans. And yeah, representation, absolutely. And it's great to think about positive action and, actually diversifying that workforce. But there is something to remember about creating an environment that welcomes those new arrivals. It's tricky being the only one in the room. It's uncomfortable, and sometimes it's just downright hostile. And at first you think, I've got this job, brilliant. And then you get there and it's like, but everyone's treating me like a second-class citizen, awesome. Or they're expecting you to do all the diversity work.
We're laughing because we know it.
So, it is hard work, and it's something that you need to have a think about in terms of your environment, because you want to hire people and you want them to do well, and doing well goes beyond just being there and just being a face in a crowd full of people who don't look like you. Yeah. So I think, there's got to be a little bit of self-reflection, but it's a combination of that self-reflection, but also reaching out and doing a bit of research and asking for help from people around you. And when you go for that help, or when you make those hires, it is about treating people fairly. And it's so basic. This is like something you learn from your mum when you're little. It's like, treat people nicely, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. So yeah, paying people fairly, absolutely. Treating people with care, and just realizing that, this isn't just necessarily an issue around equality and diversity, but an issue around our interpersonal relations and the world that we want to see in terms of caring for each other, and our thinking about our mental health and our well-being. And if you lead with that sort of practice of care, then I don't think you can go far wrong. Making sure that environment's welcoming, making sure people have what they need to do a good job, whether it is encouragement, decent pay, or considerate flexibility hugely, then you're going to get the best out of people, and people feel like they can give something, and that they have that level of agency, so that they can speak on an equal basis, and their feelings and thoughts and needs are going to be considered on an equal basis. Because how often do you feel like you're screaming into the void? I really need this in order to do a good job for you, but it's not forthcoming. Or I need to be given credit for my work. Again, something super basic, but when it's not forthcoming, it's soul destroying. And you just don't want to work for them anymore. No thanks. And that's another sort of skilled professional or enthusiastic, clever volunteer that you've let go just because of those little acts of care that are so important.
To add to that, I think also admitting unconscious bias on their part, because I think going into these settings, people are still in denial. Things like white privilege exist, and microaggressions and all these terms are being thrown around. Yet, and until they acknowledge the actual things that people of colour experience, we are not going to feel safe and feel included in those spaces. And we never want to ever feel we were only employed to be the token Black person. Positive discrimination. Oh yes, we have an inclusive environment. We have 5% of our staff, and that's what people will do and accuse you of. And as a person of colour, I want to know I've earned my space in that on the table, rather than, you know, to meet an inclusive tick sheet. And I think that balance, isn't it, as well? Committing to actually addressing those issues of microaggression and, you know, unconscious bias does exist, and, you know, how are you going to address that in the workplace?
Yeah, and sorry, did you want to say something, SHAR?
Just gonna dip in, and I was just gonna say, like, some of the conversations that, you know, I can have are, there's now a lot of fear, you know, because of, you know, white privilege and, you know, and male white privilege and all that. And I think that, you know, it's the tricky thing now is that, you know, that's seen as like a bit of a dirty word, you know, unconscious bias. And actually, you know, I think it's about just going, yeah, okay, that's a thing, you know, I get it, you know, I have white privilege, or I have some unconscious bias, or we have some unconscious bias within our organization. And yeah, how can we be more inclusive? Because I think now that's a thing, you know, the white privilege is a thing. There's now a lot of fear around that, and it's like, well, I don't want to say this because I'm coming from a white privileged, you know, perspective, or, you know, I don't want to say this in case it comes across as unconscious bias. So and I think that, you know, it is just, yeah, about having more conversations, isn't it, and just digging into that and letting go of the fear, maybe, of like being wrong just because, you know, just because you're white, it doesn't mean you're wrong.
Yeah. No, SHAR, what you said there at the end is definitely the biggest thing I was going to say there as well. I was going to say, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, most of the time, at the end of the day, most of the time, the reason why like racism and other inequalities exist is due to ignorance. And ignorance comes from not knowing, right? So if you actually ask the questions and you actually did the research, such as what we when Geraldine said about going to Google and so on and so forth, or just being there and not being afraid to ask the questions, you'll never know the answer, right? And then you'll just continuously just be doing the same, we're committing inequalities, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So it's just about also not being afraid to just ask a question. You know, that's all I'd say. I mean, on that, and so on what Catherine was saying before as well, in terms of like with organizations and the like, I'd say also just community engagement. You know, engaging with the community around you. If you want to if you want to make your workspace or your environment reflective of the entire community that you inhabit, then you should also not have conversations and not be afraid to bring those people on board, especially when it comes to like powers of position. I mean, power of position. Positions of power. I did that the opposite way around. Positions of power and boards and things like that. By engaging with the community, then you can fully understand the problems that need addressing. And then also it prevents that aspect of feeling like the only person there, like, oh, everybody's looking at me. It reminds me of like when I was like, I don't know, in school and I was like one of the only Black people in class, and Roots would come on, and then you'd feel like, oh, everybody wants to ask me the questions. Like, oh, so it's good to have other people that are also that come from your sort of background, or who also relate to you on board too, so you don't feel like the only person, like the odd person out. As well. So those are some things. And then lastly, what I'd say is creating realistic and measurable goals, you know, something that you can actually go back to, because something I always find is not so much so now, but for a long time when people will be having these type of conversations, it'd be like you'd have the conversation and then people would just forget about it after like a year passes, and then everything goes back to normal. Nobody at that time, I find now that I'm seeing more people doing it, but for a long time, there was no like sort of form of evaluation, like, oh, where are we now? And like, oh, how have we progressed? Like, what's going on? Things like that. Always like the job's not over. It's just like what people were saying about when posting black squares, like it doesn't end there. You know, that's just the beginning. So it's like having that sort of thought in mind with whatever you do, whatever changes you make, always being like, what, how else can we progress, and knowing that there's still a lot more that needs to be done. But definitely having some sort of measurable goal to see like, okay, where we come to, and what else can we do to further the good positive agendas or whatnot that we're trying to accomplish.
I think I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, Blue, and I think that one of the things that you know I think is really good to do is like not just to be asking questions with other black folk. It's like having those questions and those conversations in your family, in your friend group, with other people of other, you know, nationalities and coming from different backgrounds, because I think that's the thing. In the past, it's been about, well, you know, you're a black person, so can you tell me what to do, please? Because, you know, I don't know what to do. And that just doesn't fly anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you can't just be, you know, and I think Geraldine said it about getting the token black person or the token, you know, other person from, you know, another minority. And I think that just feels important, to be having conversations with your partner, with your mum, with your dad. You know, I know that I've had lots of conversations within my family, and some of the you know, some of the answers of or some of the conversations have been hard conversations. But yeah, I think it's like getting on Google, reading books, you know, all the information's there for you. You don't need to be like harping on your black friends or your, you know, your black associates to do the work. Like, actually, this is about everyone, you know, taking it on themselves, and then, you know, carrying on having those conversations.
I think people need to remember as well. Sorry, Blue. Not every black person has the same experience. You know, we all have our own lived experience, whether it's through colorism, shadism, or there's all these intersectionality factors to also consider. And so when you ask one person, that's not going to be replicated with the you know, even their sibling. And I think that needs to be taken into account when we do talk about the Black Square. Like, we look at gender fluidity, and we also look at how black women, especially dark-skinned women, do not get the same treatment as a lighter skinned black woman. And those are also all the factors that people don't always consider, and it's such a wide spectrum that you will never really fully understand or try and get across either.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the differences. So you basically said that for me.
Filling all your lines today.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, we're not a monolith. So like, yeah, there's got many different, like, yeah, I'm going to basically just repeat what Geraldine said, so there's no point in me saying that. But yeah, that and the last thing I was going to say was to what SHAR said is yeah, just being comfortable being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable is what I was going to add. Yeah.
Amen to that. Oh, okay. I think we'll leave it there. That feels like a nice point to leave that question there. Thank you for everyone's input so far. So yeah, we'll move on to the last question. And this is kind of more focused towards young people. You know, what advice or, you know, what would you have to say to a young person wanting to get more involved in kind of peaceful protests and active citizenship? And again, that's open to all of you.
I'm a massive believer that if students understand the relevance of what they're protesting, make it, showing them, yes, civil rights happened. Yes, like they can see this, the BLM is our version, we're living it, and that we're trying to encourage them to be good citizens that who speak up for oppressed groups, no matter what that oppressed group is, whether it is Palestine, freeing Palestine, and or whether it is LGBTQ rights. It's what we're trying to instill in them is the attitudes and also the skills in order to challenge people, because unfortunately some of these children will have a lot of impressionable people in their lives who will try and pass on unsavory views, and I think this generation in particular are very open to everything because they've got so many resources and accessibility, and the laws are there now where it is okay for two ethnicity groups to be married. It's okay for two people of the same gender to be married. Like that wasn't necessarily the case for our parents and grandparents, but they're living it. But there'll always be something, and a protest is where it starts, making good noise, isn't it? That's what they say. Like with even my children, I don't think there's ever an age where you cannot talk about injustices. My son yesterday, just watching the football again, the taking the knee and how it's taken over, that's become the topical conversation throughout this whole Euros match. And without prompting, he went, "Oh, they're taking the knee because of Black Lives Matter." I went, "Yeah, they are." And it was just a matter of fact. And I think sometimes as adults, we overfear and try and protect and model coddle all these children and protect them from the world. But at the end of the day, we didn't get protected from racism. And I think that's what people forget. They're like, we didn't have the option. Our parents had to talk to us about race from a young age in preparation. And I think if we're old enough to have those conversations, why can those conversations not happen with all children? And I think we need to give credit for these children as well, and not just see them as passive people who just, they need to be active in their learning. And that's why I'm very happy that a lot of schools now locally, when they have been talking about the slave trade, they've taken it from the approach of the Black Lives Matter. They've reversed. So they start now, the defacing of statues in our city, wanting to change street names after slave owners. Then we go backwards to history, like, okay, why did those people do that during the Black Lives Matter? And then go, and so they can see the relevance. And I think I remember going to school, like, why are we learning about Pythagoras theory? Why are we learning about trigonometry? Because they didn't put it into context, real life context. Whereas this is very real and it's happening in real time. So why are we trying to, pretend and only choose the things that are deemed appropriate for the classroom? This is actual history. We're living history now.
Yes.
Yes. Just had to get that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing I'd add is just making sure that the advice I'd give is to make them just engage with things that's happening around them. For me, the way in which I came about was, like, the thing that really helped me was when I went to youth centers. I used to go to quite a lot of youth centers when I was younger, and I was always told about a lot of projects that were going on. And I'd involved myself in a lot of these different projects and learn a lot, and it developed me. It allowed me to upskill myself, allowed me to be okay with using my voice to make changes, empowered me. So I'd say just really involve yourself in those type of projects too. Look out for opportunities that allow you to really embolden yourself, really empower yourself, not be afraid to become a change maker, and just like the arts really helped me, for instance, with that, like my spoken word and music and things like that. But yeah, just really, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but just really like being involved within the community. That kind of as a young and from a young as a youth kind of gives you like the toolkits to use you get older and you start doing like larger changes, like that's all I'd add. Yeah, I can't think of anything else right now, but yeah.
I think advice that I could give for young people. Wow. So I think maybe remembering that there are different forms of activism and protest, and you don't have to be standing with a placard if that's not what you feel comfortable and safe with. So it could even be sort of, like we mentioned before, talking to your friends and family, ranging to some kind maybe more gentle protests, like things like sort of craftivism based things, or as long as something is working towards change, then it all counts and it all helps. And again, it's about being confident and making sure that whatever you're doing is the best for you. There's definitely something to be said about not being a lifestyle ally. It's like, it's quite clear when people don't actually believe in something, they're doing it because it's cool. The intention is very, very visible. So, if you're going to be a lifestyle ally, you might think you're helping, but if nothing's going to come out of that, that could prove really problematic. So find something that you feel strongly about and that you believe in, and that intention will come through. And you will find like-minded people who want to support you and make that connection so that you can work towards achieving your goal. You want to bear in mind that allies, or maybe even accomplices, because that feels like you're really in it together, they're not afraid to have unsettling and challenging discussions and debates. There's going to be something tricky, otherwise what's the point in protesting in the first place? You're going to do changing hearts and minds, and challenging is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do when confronted with somebody who's like, nope. So bear that in mind, and that might take something out of you, and sometimes you might just feel like, actually, this isn't right for me right now. So please, be aware that it's not always going to be easy. There's going to be difficult conversations, and make sure you have some support mechanisms to help you with that. Whether that is somebody, could be a friend, could be a member of the family, could be an organisation that's linked with that cause, just for moral support, sort of, am I doing this the right way? I've had this response and I feel terrible. But also they might have methods of getting your message across and past experience that you can rely on and you can adapt and learn from. That's really, really helpful. But similarly, we know that social media is not always the nicest of places, and people can be downright awful. So please make sure that if you see anything that is hurtful and abusive, that you report it appropriately, because people need to own up to what they're doing online. Otherwise, this is going to go on, and it's absolutely devastating, the effect that abuse and harassment on social media can be. So please, if you are receiving any of it or witnessing it, make sure it's reported to the appropriate people. Yeah, so again, it's back to that message of taking care of yourself, really, because I don't think we're necessarily in the place right now where institutions are going to do it for you, which is really sad. I wish I didn't have to go on about self-care all the time. I wish that I didn't have to think about healing and caring all the time. But such is the way of the world, and we've got to think about this realistically. And the last thing we want is young people feeling distressed or burnt out, or just really exasperated to the point of, I don't want to do this anymore. But yeah, please remember that there are organisations and there are people out there that will support you on your activism journey, and that you just need to do it in your own way, and take, just plan ahead with what you're doing. In Blackpool, we've got an organisation called Head Start, and they're about to start an activist in residence project, which is where a young person who feels really strongly about a social issue will get a placement in an organisation and get support to work on their own activism project in a, I don't want to say appropriate way, but in a way that's going to basically be the best for them and their well-being, but also make some change, hopefully, too. So I think that might be an interesting thing to check out as that starts up in the next couple of months.
Cool. Well, I feel like that feels like a nice place to end it, and I just want to thank you for being so up for this and just coming with all the loveliness that you have. It's just been an amazing conversation, so thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. I loved that. It was good. It was really good. And I'll definitely make sure to, what Catherine said there, self-care is a big, massive one, especially with what's been going on now from what I've been seeing in the comments, and on the internet and things like that. But thank you for inviting us. I really enjoyed it.